Welcome to Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. I'm back with my pops, Wayne Carter. We're going to continue this family conversation that we're having. Um, Pops, I appreciate you being here with me again. How are you, sir?
Doing good, doing good. Had a good day. Got out and got a little walk-ins. Good day.
Yeah, where'd you go?
We went over to Johnson Woods.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Tell everybody that might watch this about Johnson Woods. What's Johnson's Woods for everybody?
It's a wooded area in the south, I guess south part of Bradley County near the McDonald community. Broad Street Methodist Church owns the property, and they have area out there. Uh, I can measure it. It's like 3.1 mile trail on one, and then they have another mile trail, and folks go out there and walk and bicycle, dirt bikes, and it's a nice little area.
That's cool. That's cool. What was the weather like down there? It's kind of dreary looking out here all day today.
It got to being pretty nice around probably two, and I just got in maybe 30, 40 minutes ago, and we was up near 48 degrees, I think.
No, that's nice. That's real
Yeah.
nice. All right. Well, getting back kind of to our previous and continuing conversation, we were talking about kind of your late elementary to kind of middle school era and kind of your experiences during that civil rights era. And you said something that was kind of interesting to me. Um, you kind of commented that the violence of 1968 combined maybe with some information or your experience of the Vietnam War and with Uncle Donnie having to be a participant in that caused you said a distrust in the government. Do you recall that?
Yeah, and kind of what I remember, it came out in the late '60s, early '70s. Uh, and it came out more and more became like that the information or the what the public was getting about the Vietnam War was just not true, and the idea that the communists were taking over the world, uh, that was not accurate, and a good part of what the economy, American economy, and looking back on it now from somewhat an educated position, but the American economy has generally always been a wartime economy. And so the people that were making money were the people that were making the helicopters and the tanks and the stuff. And then the poor soldiers like brother and myself later on, we're over there doing what we're told to do in support of our country, but we're told one thing when the truth was probably something else. And so the people supported it. I think the voters supported Vietnam, during the 50s and 60s, but late 60s, early 70s, when the truth started coming out, people became not so supportive of it.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, and so you're in 68, I know, so you're what, 14, right? Um, what do you think about that political atmosphere? What was kind of your views, maybe of the country? Was there a different kind of experience with maybe national politics and local politics? And at that young age, I mean, what did you really know about that? Or what were you kind of just gathering this information that was coming to you and kind of trying to figure it out based on maybe how everybody else was feeling?
Yeah, I don't know at 14 or 15 or even 16 and 17 that I had an opinion. Information was coming to you and you were dealing with it. And, like every other teenager, I suspect, those high school years, you're more interested in, playing sports and trying to make some sort of impact on a female. Those are the things that are important to you. But then you got an older brother that went off to Vietnam, and you start hearing all this stuff. Catching a few things on the news and hearing teachers talk about stuff. And I think what really opened my eyes was when I went to MTSU and had some buddies, got some acquaintances that were Vietnam vets that had come back and went to college, and kind of hearing their perspective of it. I think that probably had that, but freshman year in college was probably a big impactful thing.
Hmm. Okay, well, so before we get you to MTSU, when did you graduate high school? What year did you graduate?
72.
1972. Um, what were the highlights of kind of high school, I guess? I mean, we talked about your football career a little bit. We really haven't talked about basketball, which maybe you had a more successful overall career. Tell me about that. What was your experience like in basketball? When was that introduced?
Well, I started playing basketball probably in the sixth grade as an organized schools thing at Laverne, and then the 1 year in junior high school, which we called it, was ninth grade. Thurman Francis Junior High School. We played there. Was a starter. Uh, Probably wasn't. I mean, I wasn't the best guy on the team, but we played, and then went into high school, and I sort of thought about this a little bit since you and I've talked. Um, I think high school was really depressing for me because I got hurt playing football, and that carried on through my basketball. So I didn't really get to play, that much basketball because I was healing up from football, and
Hmm.
because then I would, get healed up and go back toward the end of the season, and because we had pretty good teams, but we didn't have they didn't have the playoff system they have now, and so in my particularly my senior year, I got that's when I got my collarbone busted up, and I don't think I got over that till probably out January or February, and basketball season's about over by then, and
Yeah.
it was it, it was probably a good thing for me in a lot of ways. Um, I became a lot more active in the youth group at church because I had that time to do, and it was close to where we lived, and that became probably more important in my life really than the school stuff.
Hmm. That's interesting. That's interesting. And so really, and something that we haven't talked about a lot, but the church was really a cornerstone of community for you and for the family in general. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, and I think for that area, particularly of Laverne, but I think of the friends that I had because I had, probably my best friend in high school was Wayne Blair, and he went to the Church of Christ. But we played football together all the way, and we went elementary school and high school, and he and I still communicate a lot. But the other guys, the Waldron boys, uh, Scott Vaden, a number of other guys that lived in close proximity where we live, went to Laverne First Baptist Church, and so that was the Ursary boys, which was the pastor's three boys. Uh, so yeah, we were looking back on it. That was a very positive event for me, and we had a lady named Shirley Vaden and her husband Glenn, but Shirley prominently was our youth leader. Her son Scott was my age, and because it was all volunteer. There nobody paid to do this. And she spent a lot of time doing things and putting together things with that group of youth people. And we probably had at least 20, if not up to 30 young teenagers that were involved in that.
Hmm. Do you think that the church, obviously, it created that community space, and it gave you sounds like a maybe a core friend group for that period of your life. Did the church supplement your education any in your younger life? Do you think?
Well, yeah, supplement's probably a good word, but I look back on even my faith today. Uh, the, the 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 stories and stuff that we learned, early on in, preschool and elementary and middle school, and even in the high school, those things still resonate, with me. And so, as your faith grows, you have a different perspective of those stories, different way of interpreting those stories, but those stories are fundamentally there because of those folks.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Um, so you know me a little bit, so I just find the crossroads of those traditional values and our modern society kind of interesting, and how we kind of say that certain maybe ideologies are consistent or support certain values, but it seems like what we see in actuality is the opposite. And so I just kind of am interested in that whole intersection, maybe is the best way to say.
Well, and I think, of course, part of it is, you get these lessons and stuff from church, but then you also see how folks actually live. And I go back, and you knew my parents well. I mean, none of us are perfect people, but I think they live fundamentally the Christian ethics of loving other people, of putting other people first, taking care of community. We didn't have a lot economically, but if somebody needed something, if we had it, they had it. And in the community. So I think that's somewhat the Christian ethos.
Yeah, sure. Well, and on top of that, do you think that now I know where you live right now, you kind of know all your neighbors and you're really blessed in that sense. But do you think, that idea of community um, in the neighborhood and with the people that you live with was maybe stronger in those days than it is now, or is it just different? What do you think about that?
I don't know that it was stronger because the people that live close to us, if they were if they went to First Baptist Church, I knew them very well. But there were other people that lived fairly close that I knew, and might played with, but I didn't consider them as close to me as the folks at the Baptist Church.
Hmm.
The folks next door, uh, uh, which would be on the west side of mom and dad, uh, they went to the Nazarene, and good folks, and we got along fine. There was never any problem, but I didn't socialize with them because the church was our social events.
Yeah, yeah,
And the folks on the uh, other side of mom and dad, I think they were Church of Christ, good people, knew them well. We all got no problems. It's just, you know, we didn't socialize with them.
yeah. So just from my curiosity, and we're really going down a path that I wasn't planning on today, but that's all right. When you say these social events, what did that look like at the church? I mean, did y'all have revivals, different, were these just regular Bible study meetings? Were these special events, guest speakers, singers? What was that like, and what were those events like, and kind of your experience of that stuff?
Yeah, well, everything you mentioned, all the above. so,
Okay.
so um, you know, at
Well, what
one
was the
point,
regular schedule? Let's just start out. What was the regular schedule? I mean, we'll just start out with Sunday morning. What did you start with, Sunday school and then service? Just let's go through the church week schedule, and then we'll get into those special events maybe.
well,
In
yes,
high school, or kind of your high school age, you got youth group and stuff like that.
okay. Well, at that point, it was always Sunday morning, Sunday school, and then church service up till noon or so, and then I don't know, 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening would have been a Sunday evening service, and they had what they called, the Baptists had what they called training union. It was kind of like Sunday school, but it was more doctrinal, whereas I think Sunday school was more biblical, and the Sunday night was doctrinal stuff. And then you had a service after either of those. Uh, then Wednesday night there would have been uh, a youth group type events, and then some type of preaching service, generally on Wednesday nights. And then weekends, depending on, there would be maybe something going on. Particularly in high school, I was blessed to be involved in a singing group, uh, and I was not a major player in that. I was, a backup kind of guy, but it was good. And so we would probably go somewhere nearly every weekend in another church or something to, perform. And then, back again on Sunday mornings at church. So it kept us pretty busy.
Yeah, that is a pretty busy schedule. What about those guest speakers or musicians, even, and the revivals? What did that look like in
Yeah.
the
Early,
1970s Middle Tennessee Southern Baptist Church?
when it evolved, because back in the 60s, if I recall, we would have a revival service twice a year, and they would go a week or 2 weeks. We have one in the spring and one in the summer. But as I got into high school, I think it become uh, just once a year maybe, and it was down to maybe a week for revival. Maybe it went twice a year, but it was down to 1 week rather than 2 weeks. Uh, and what I recall was there would be some, I guess, prayer meetings that would lead up to the revival event, and then they would call a preacher or somebody from another church to come in for a week to, what I remember, just pretty much a worship service every night during the week.
These services, those sermons, were they highly driven on the concept of eternal life and eternal salvation or damnation and
Yeah, it was definitely the hellfire and
repentance?
brimstone type stuff, and uh, the guilt complex stuff.
Yeah, well, and and that's often found, and I even found that, and I'm sure you didn't have, and I don't even remember the gentleman's name, because we always called him Preacher Man. And
Pastor Hale.
how long was that your pastor as a child, or when did he come in later? What was because there was plenty of that um, hell and brimstone language, but he also would focus on repentance and reconciliation was also two things that always seemed very important to those folks, but maybe not something that people remember as much.
I think that's accurate. Because the pastor when I grew up was a guy named Yule Ursery, and I guess the thing that he had three boys that were around my age, and we were all really good friends, and they lived sort of across the street from us. That's where the parsonage was, and so we were. It was not unusual, uh, during the week afternoon, they might be over at my house playing basketball, and Sunday afternoons, and before we'd go back to church, we'd be in their front yard playing football. So
Yeah,
that was just we were just young men.
yeah, okay. That's cool. And I wanted to ask you something else kind of before we get in. I swear we're going to get you over to MTSU eventually. Um, but, and we talked a little bit about this. What was your experience like, or what do you remember about any, family vacations? I know when I asked you about that, you kind of chuckled a little bit. And then you kind of remembered, well, we would do this or that when Dad was in between jobs and things like that. What do you remember? Did y'all take any time to take any trips and have any recreation as a family?
Well, I do remember, after you mentioned that, there probably a couple of times. Maybe when I was in middle school, high school, during that time frame when Dad would be in between jobs in the summer, he'd take a few days off and we'd go up to the Smoky Mountains and do that. And I think that's why I fell in love with the mountains so much, is that was in my mind the vacation place. And so when I had an opportunity to come over here to Cleveland to take a job, I thought, well, I'm taking a job in the place where I want to go vacate. So uh, yeah.
That's cool. And what did y'all do?
Uh, Pretty much just rode around. I remember a couple of times, uh, they would, they would let me go into, I think this is maybe up in Cherokee, North Carolina. There was like a ghost town in the sky, uh, tourist type thing. And they didn't really know what that was. And I said, well, you can go. And I actually, memory was, I thought it was just a ride. Didn't realize you're taking a ride up this town up in the mountains, and there was a whole show going on.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
they thought I was going to be gone for a few minutes, and I was gone for several hours.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was the one that really remembered. We just didn't have a clue. Um, that was the one I remember. Yeah.
Wow. Well, had they ever been down to the Gulf or to the Atlantic or anything like that? I don't ever remember them going with us either. I guess, was there one time we were all down in Florida together at my nanny and papa's? I don't know. I remember there's some. I don't know if we ever got grandma and granddaddy down there or we just talked about that.
I don't remember anything. The only time I remember Mom and Dad coming to the Gulf is when I was in the Air Force, stationed at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Yeah.
They came to visit down there, but and they would come over to Fort Bragg when I was over there to visit in Fayetteville. But as far as, and they had to have gone to the beach at some points when Dad was, over working on the Savannah River plant, but that was, before I came along. 'Cause I have seen pictures of that, but it was before me.
Okay. Okay. Hmm. Well, that's cool. Well, hey, we've been talking for a little while, and I don't want to shorten our talk about your MTSU experience. Um, But before we kind of close out today, is there anything that you would want to add, or like something that you felt stood out about your childhood, early childhood, and early life that really impacted you? I mean, there's a lot of stories in between that we kind of didn't talk about. I mean, you mentioned Perry Mason, and I remember the story was from Granddad that when you were like in the sixth grade, you told him you were going to be a lawyer, and he just had a real good feeling that that was going to come to fruition. I mean, those are my words, not his, but that was the feeling that he kind of gave about it. Um, it sounds like you had a really good family support system. I know oftentimes when we look back on our life, we can look back in nostalgia and with rose colored lenses on and things of that nature. Um, but what do you really think was the biggest impact of your childhood and maybe the family or your experience in Laverne growing up? What would be the biggest thing to communicate to express what that was like?
Well, and of course, you're saying, obviously, stating this from the looking back on it, and I think at the time you probably don't realize it, but when you look back on it, I think the fact that Dad was it was important to Dad that we go to church on Sundays. It was never an option, never a discussion. That just happened, and I think looking back on that and the way he lived, and then you couple that with the impact that the church had socially as well as, I guess, even theologically. Uh, those early formative years and having those experiences uh, probably were the most important.
Yeah, I find that very interesting. I am a public servant. You spent your career in service to the state, to the federal government, to the church, you know, and it's something that maybe I missed out on in my relationship with Granddad was that community service that I've heard through our conversation. I knew that he was um, a union member and active in a certain extent, but I didn't know that he was a trustee. And that's a pretty important position when you're taking in a lot of fees from a lot of hardworking folks, and you're deciding how you're going to spend that money. That's a pretty big thing, and his impact and involvement in the church, and in the community. It's like that example of service that I always say was set for me by you and my mother, was kind of set for you, but maybe in a little different way.
Yeah, I've said this probably to you before, but it always comes out that I don't ever remember Dad uh, reading the scripture out loud in church. I don't ever remember him singing a song in church. Didn't speak in church. Didn't make a prayer in church, but he was always there.
Yeah.
And I think that just fact that there was always that consistency was significant to me.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks again, Pops. I really love this. This has been Maxwell 3000 production. I am Maxwell 3000. Peace and love.